So Francis Ngannou has been officially released from the UFC, and now his heavyweight world championship is up for grabs, and the winner of Jon Jones versus Ciryl Gane at the start of March on the UFC 285 pay-per-view headliner will be crowned the new heavyweight champion of the UFC. Let's talk about this entire situation because it is absolute madness. Out of nowhere, there was a little bit of a leak that maybe on the side of the T-Mobile Arena there was a sign that said Jon Jones versus Ciryl Gane for the heavyweight world championship, and I guess the UFC saw that and said, well, someone's leaked it, we've announced it a little bit prematurely, I guess we'll just come out and announce it now that Francis Ngannou not only has been stripped of his title, and now Jones versus Gane will be taking place for that very title, but he's gone from the UFC. And I'll be honest with you guys. I said this would happen. I've been saying this would happen. I said it. Francis Ngannou is going to ask for a little bit too much money. The UFC are not going to pay him that money. And I said that the UFC will have absolutely no problem with Francis Ngannou leaving the organization. They will move on with Jon Jones. That's all they're going to do. And now Jon Jones apparently has signed a new 8-fight deal with the UFC. Do I believe he's going to fight all of those 8 fights? No, I don't. I think he'll probably beat Ciryl Gane, maybe look for a Stipe Miocic matchup, and then probably retire from the sport for good. But they have moved on with Jon Jones. Apparently, they offered Francis Ngannou the most money any heavyweight has made in UFC history, which is crazy if it's true. I don't know if it's true. I guess Ngannou will come out and say how much they offered him or if he felt like it was the most in UFC heavyweight history. But Brock Lesnar, he got offered a lot of money at heavyweight. So, you know, I'm sure it was a lot of money that they offered Francis Ngannou. Was it 10 million a fight? Probably not. You know what I reckon they offered Francis Ngannou? Here's 2 million a fight. We'll give you 10% of the pay-per-view sales as well. Take the Jon Jones fight, sign a 5-fight deal. But what we're seeing with a lot of these fighters, and we're seeing this with Paulo Costa, is they don't want the 5-fight deal. But the UFC needs them to take a 5-fight deal. And this is the problem. And with the UFC, I said this a long time ago, everyone was so all over Ngannou. I want to say this to all of the media members. You have done this. Because all of the media members, Ariel Helwani, Luke Thomas, all these people were like, yes, Ngannou's going to get all his money from the UFC. He's got them right where he wants them. And I said, no, he doesn't. He has no leverage whatsoever. They're going to leave him out of the UFC. They have Jon Jones. They'll just kick him out of the UFC and he can go fight Ante Delija in the main event of a PFL pay-per-view at some point. The only other heavyweight on MMA on earth. I don't know why everyone was encouraging this behavior. We're not going to get Ngannou now. You know what I mean? He's gone. And the UFC do not care. Ngannou's last pay-per-view sold 200,000 buys. You know? They don't care. They will move on. They'll make Jones versus Gane. And guess what? They're banking on Jones winning. That if Ciryl Gane wins, he'll be the guy that beat Jon Jones. But they do want Jon Jones to win, so then they can say, oh, Jon Jones clearly beat Ciryl Gane. The Francis Ngannou-Ciryl Gane fight was very close, and I literally have said this so much now. Gane could have won that fight. Round 5, Ngannou did literally 0 damage to Ciryl Gane. Gane had a leg lock attempt. Gane got the takedown in the first place. He had equal control time to Francis Ngannou in that round, and he outlanded Francis Ngannou significantly on the feet in that round as well. Watch them paint that narrative. All of a sudden, they painted a narrative after Ngannou got his hand raised against Gane to say Ngannou won the fight using his wrestling. They will immediately flip on a dime and say, and people were confused around the world over who should have won, and it went to Ngannou, very controversial. I bet you they're going to paint that narrative. And if Jon Jones goes out there and clearly beats Ciryl Gane, which I believe he could do, because again, if Ngannou is taking you down, what's a heavyweight-sized Jon Jones going to do who actually has the wrestling credentials? I know Gane is going to be preparing for grappling for that fight, and he definitely wasn't for the Francis Ngannou fight, but Jon Jones is a hell of a wrestler. And this isn't far-fetched to say, but if he gets down Ciryl Gane the same way Ngannou did, and spends 4 minutes of a round in round 3 on top of him, all of a sudden, it's Jon Jones on top of you. And he's putting hooks in. And he's landing ground and pound. And he's threatening rear naked chokes. And he's going for submissions. And he's looking for a Kimura. It's a different type of guy, jiu-jitsu-wise, to have on top of you as a grappler, compared to a guy like Francis Ngannou, who's just laying there doing nothing but heavy breathe on top of you for 4 minutes. So if Jones does dominantly beat Gane, or clearly beat Gane, the UFC will say, Jones is the best heavyweight on earth. You can't prove otherwise. Watch him beat Stipe, who's now an old man, and definitely won't beat Jones if Jones can pull off the win against Ciryl Gane. And the UFC will win in the long run. It's what they're going to do. And Jones has known about this event. Ciryl Gane, there was rumours a while ago of him being injured and not coming back too early next year. This year, now, 2023. There were rumours that he might have had a broken hand or a bad knee after the Tuivasa fight, and now he's going to have to take a little bit of time off and take some time and come back in May or June or something like that. But now he's seen this opportunity with Jones. All of a sudden, those rumours of an injury aren't around anymore. And Ciryl Gane's got 6 weeks of training to take on one of the best to ever do it, who's known about his fight date or his eventual move to heavyweight and the fact that he's going to be fighting for a heavyweight world championship for the better part of the last 2 years. It's in favour of Jon Jones. He'll probably win, and they'll move on. And I'll be honest with you guys, thank God. Thank God. Ngannou ain't fought in 13 months. And if he weren't ready for this fight, and he weren't ready to take the deal the UFC was going to give him, and he really wants to go elsewhere and see if he can earn more money, go ahead, dude. Move on. Go elsewhere. I'm not trying to see the heavyweight world championship defended once every year and a half and just listen to you whine and complain all year about money. And it's sad that that's the reality. Isn't that sad? I'm an MMA fan, though. I don't care about Ngannou that much. You know what I mean? Like, he's gone. Oh, well. Fight Ante Delija. I'll find out who won on Full Violence, on ESPN MMA, or on Twitter when they post the result of the KO. And some people will go over to watch Ngannou, like Skinny Betts is saying here. I'll be tuned into whatever Francis decides to do next. You know what I mean? Hope he gets what he's looking for. I'm sure people will be tuned in. There won't be a lot of them. And I'll be honest with you, I don't know if Ngannou's going to get the 10 million that he wants to get, or the 5 million per fight that he wants to get, or whatever he's going to get. I really don't. I really don't. And just like that, this guy says it in the comments. And just like that, he's no longer relevant in combat sports. I promise you, Ngannou will fade into irrelevancy, and he'll be remembered as one of those guys in UFC history when MMA On Point make a video in 2025, 2027, 2030. When MMA On Point make a video, biggest what-ifs in UFC history. Boom. Francis Ngannou could have been the heavyweight GOAT, could have gone on and become something, had a problem with the UFC, went to fight Ante Delija and some fat, morbidly obese heavyweights at PFL, and then maybe, who knows, fight Ryan Bader at heavyweight. Can't wait to see Ngannou versus Chuck Congo. There's no fights. Boxing, maybe? Maybe it's boxing. But the fact that his mum had a PFL shirt on, or his auntie had a PFL shirt on in that post that he did, makes me feel like he's going to go around MMA and see what other promotions want him. But the fact is, UFC have the heavyweights in MMA. You can look through the rankings of the UFC heavyweight division. They have all the cards. You know? And all it takes is this. I promise you, all it takes is this. Someone to beat Stipe in the first round. Someone to finish Ciryl Gane rather than take him to a controversial decision. Someone to beat anyone Ngannou beat better than he beat them. All of a sudden, people will be talking about them as the best heavyweight on earth. And then maybe someone defends the belt 3 times. Maybe Pavlovich KOs Stipe in 1 minute. And everyone's like, wow, Ngannou took Stipe to the 2nd round before he could KO him. Pavlovich just did it in 1 minute. Ngannou didn't even engage with Derek Lewis. Ran around the ring for 3 rounds. Pavlovich did it in 60 seconds. This is how the UFC works. I'm not saying this is how everyone's going to think, but this is how the UFC works, and that's the narrative they're going to paint. Someone already made a viral video of it on a short on YouTube. There's a video of it like Taito Ivasa versus Derek Lewis compared to Ngannou versus Derek Lewis. And it's Ngannou being scared of the heavyweight KO king, and then Tuivasa scrapping with him and finishing him. And that's how the internet works. People will make those comparisons. The UFC will push those comparisons. And Ngannou will fade into irrelevancy. Earn his little bit of money in the short term. I think the best option for Ngannou is test out another MMA organization. Beat some fat irrelevant heavyweight that no one cares about. That's probably a former UFC heavyweight anyway. From about a decade ago. Let's be real. Then try out boxing. I think boxing's the move for Ngannou. We'll see if he decides to go down that road. Because I think that's the only real possible matchup for him that makes sense. That's the only real career that he could have that's going to last 2 years, 3 years of interest. Because I'll be honest, if boxing really wanted to, they'll give Ngannou a couple mil to fight Dillian Whyte. They will. They'll give Ngannou a couple million to fight Dillian Whyte. And you're in a moment in boxing right now where you got guys like Tyson Fury and Alexander Usyk beating all the other competition. Fury's beaten Wilder pretty much 3 times, but 2 times clearly. So that fight's done with. Wilder can't get a title shot as long as Fury's champ. Usyk's beaten AJ twice. AJ can't get a title shot as long as Usyk's champ. So now you got all these big names that aren't champions that you can risk fighting an Ngannou as a big money fight. So what I would say you should do, give Ngannou some time in MMA to destroy these fat old men that no one cares about, that he's going to be fighting next, that people are going to find out about the day after, or somewhere on Twitter, wherever someone posts the highlight of it. Because let's be real, literally about 10k people brought the PFL final. It's a dying business. They lose money every year. Even ONE FC lost like 100 million last year. So, you know, just saying the reality here. And maybe then he can go over to boxing, fight Dillian Whyte. Fun fight. Maybe as a warm-up, which he could win. Chris Arreola, I think his name is. The guy who fought Andy Ruiz that lost. Try and fight him. Ngannou's much bigger than him. Much more powerful. Not as good of a boxer, of course, but beat him for a mil. Beat Dillian Whyte for 2 mil. I'm not saying he's going to do this. Chisora will always say yes to fights like that. He's a pretty big name. But what I would do if I was Ngannou's manager, I'd say, let me destroy these fat old men that no one cares about in the PFL, at heavyweight, or anything like that, for a year or 2 whilst we practice a bit of boxing. So for a year, while we practice a bit of boxing in the background, because he's going to beat these top heavyweights anyway. And then let's have Ngannou go over to boxing, 2024. Dillian Whyte, a little bit older. Maybe he suffers another KO loss. If you can get past Dillian Whyte, boxing will say, you know what? We're open to the idea of an Anthony Joshua fight for a bunch of money. Here's 10 million Ngannou. Or we're open to an idea of a Wilder versus Ngannou fight. Here's 10 million Ngannou. And that's the only way this all pays off, is if he goes that boxing route and he can get those big fights straight away. But the UFC do not care, dude. They'll move on. I said they'd move on. If Ngannou don't play ball and he tries to say 1 fight contract, I want 5 million, 10 million, they're going to say, you fight once every 15 months, you oaf, you big ogre of a thing, you dumbass. Why would we pay your ass? They don't care about Ngannou. They've never cared about Ngannou. Sure, they wanted him to be champ over Stipe. People say Stipe was inactive. Stipe was active compared to Ngannou. Fact. He's been out for what? By March, it would have been 14 months since we've seen Ngannou. Injury or not, 14 months since we've seen Ngannou, and he still wasn't willing to fight in March. For whatever reason that might have been. UFC is going to be like, you want us to give you 10 million? You don't fight. And when you do fight, you sell 200k pay-per-view buys and cost us 300k with ESPN. Because ESPN pays the UFC 500,000 pay-per-view shares worth of money every single pay-per-view to put on the pay-per-view, and Ngannou versus Gane did 200k. Dirt money. He's losing the money. Why would they care about him? And he's an awkward guy to deal with, and there's problems with him in the UFC. They're never going to pay him good money. Like, that's just how it is. They're never going to do that. Why would they pay a guy a whole bunch of money that, let's be honest, is probably going to end up complaining again some down the line? You know? Like, let's say they give him, all right, Ngannou, we'll give you 5 mil flat. In like a year, I bet you again, once another boxing payday comes out of Anthony Joshua getting 40 million, Ngannou's going to be like, I deserve 40 million as well. You know, and all of a sudden, the UFC's going to be like, oh, more problems with you. Oh, you're fighting once a year again. Here we are again. Why would they ever do that? And Ariel Helwani, Luke Thomas, they loved this. They encouraged this. I made a video about this ages ago. It's all going to flop, I said. I bet you Ngannou's going to be here in 2023, not fight Jones, and it's going to be all these media members' fault and his management's fault encouraging him to make this move. The only payoff is if he gets a flat 10 mil in the boxing world. It's the only payoff for him. And that's risky. That's a risky thing to try and do. You know what I mean? Because the heavyweight division in boxing is a bit of a toss-up right now at the moment. So adding Ngannou in there, is it a surge of life if he can beat one of those guys? Probably. Would he probably get KO'd by those guys pretty easily in the first round or second round because he's not as good at boxing at all? Yes. So Ngannou has basically sold out a good career he could have had with the UFC for less money for one multi-million-dollar payday in boxing or 2 multi-million-dollar paydays in boxing, and after that he'll fade into irrelevancy if he loses. He could win all of it, go against the odds, and be one of the biggest names in the world, maybe. Let's say he sleeps AJ. You never know. I don't think he does. So, yeah. And the media members encouraged it. Go against the UFC, Ngannou. We hate the UFC. Go against them. Oh, Ngannou's actually got them on the ropes right now. Oh, the UFC are really sweating. UFC said, oh, we're sweating. Oh, we're on the ropes. See you later. We need a March pay-per-view card. We can't be dealing with your hissy fits. Boom, Jones versus Gane. Boom, Gaethje versus Fiziev in London. Boom, Usman versus Edwards 3 in London. Boom. Making all these fights happen. Oh, O'Malley for a title soon? Boom, another one there. Oh, we can't rig a Pimlet fight for him to win and get a big name fight? Boom, him versus Tony Ferguson in April. McGregor's coming back. Boom. Don't hear McGregor complaining about money. Boom. McGregor in May. Boom. He loses whatever, do him again in November. Boom, McGregor Masvidal. Like, it's just, they will continue without Ngannou. Like and subscribe. Thank you for watching. Toodle Pip. I'll see you later. Goodbye.